The gold wedding band caught the late afternoon sunlight one last time before Penelope Langford pressed it into the baker's flour-dusted palm, her stomach twisting with hunger and shame in equal measure. She had not eaten in 3 days, not since burying her father beside the dusty trail 2 miles outside of Marysville, Utah Territory, his body finally succumbing to the fever that had taken him piece by piece over their long journey west. The baker, a portly man with kind eyes that had seen too much hardship to judge, nodded solemnly and wrapped 2 loaves of bread in brown paper without a word about how little gold remained in the simple band, or how desperately thin the young woman before him had become. Penelope stepped out onto the wooden boardwalk of Main Street, clutching the bread to her chest like a child holds a doll, and felt the full weight of her situation crash down upon her shoulders. She was 21 years old, alone in a mining town in the Utah Territory in the spring of 1876, without family, money, or prospects. The ring had been her mother's, passed down on her deathbed 5 years prior, and it was the last thing connecting Penelope to the life she had known in Missouri, before her father decided that California gold would solve all their problems. He had been wrong, of course, and now he was dead, and she had traded away the only piece of her mother she had left just to survive another few days. The street bustled with activity despite the hour growing late. Miners covered in red dust stumbled between saloons, their pockets temporarily heavy with silver from the local claims. Freight wagons rumbled past, and somewhere a piano played badly out of tune. Penelope found a spot on a bench outside the general store and broke off a piece of bread, forcing herself to eat slowly despite every instinct screaming at her to devour it all at once. She had learned the hard way that eating too quickly after days of nothing would only make her sick. That is a mighty small supper for someone who looks like they have not had a proper meal in a week. The voice was deep and warm, tinged with concern rather than judgment. Penelope looked up to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, denim trousers and a worn leather vest over a blue cotton shirt, all of it clean but clearly used. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his face was tanned from long hours in the sun. But it was his eyes that struck her most, a clear gray blue that seemed genuinely worried as they took in her gaunt appearance. "It is enough," she said quietly, wrapping the remaining bread more tightly. She had learned caution on the trail west. Not all men who approached a woman alone had good intentions. "I do not mean to intrude or frighten you," he said, and something in his tone made her believe him. "My name is Kieran Anderson. I own a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. I came in for supplies and could not help but notice you seemed troubled. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Anderson, but I am managing just fine." The lie tasted bitter, but pride was sometimes all a person had left. Kieran Anderson did not move away, but neither did he come closer. He simply stood there, turning his hat in his hands, clearly weighing his words carefully. "I do not mean to speak out of turn, but I saw you in the baker's shop. I was waiting behind you. I saw what you traded for that bread." Penelope's cheeks flushed hot with embarrassment. "Then you saw what is none of your concern." "You are right, and I apologize," he said quickly. "But if you are in need of work, I have a proposition that might interest you. It is entirely respectable, I give you my word." She studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. She had become good at reading men over the past months on the trail. Some wore their darkness openly, while others hid it behind false smiles. Kieran Anderson seemed different somehow, his discomfort at approaching her apparent in the way he shifted his weight and kept his distance. "What kind of work?" My ranch is successful, but I am drowning in the day-to-day management of the household. I need someone who can cook, manage supplies, keep the books in order. My last housekeeper left 3 months ago to marry a silver miner, and I have been making a mess of things ever since. The job comes with room and board, a fair wage, and I can promise you would be treated with complete respect. I have 5 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, all good men who know I would fire them instantly if they caused any trouble. Penelope wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to grab this lifeline with both hands, but caution held her back. Why would you offer this to a complete stranger? Because I recognize desperation when I see it, Kieran said simply. 3 years ago, I was nearly in your position. My parents died of cholera when I was 18, and I inherited debts along with the ranch. I almost lost everything. A banker in this town gave me a chance when no one else would, extended credit he had no reason to give. He told me that when you have been down to nothing, you understand what it means to need help. I swore that if I ever got back on my feet, I would pay that kindness forward. So here I am, trying to do just that. Something in his story rang true, and Penelope found herself wanting to trust him. I should tell you that I have never worked as a housekeeper professionally. My father and I managed on our own for years after my mother died, so I know how to cook and clean and manage a household, but I have no formal references. Can you make beef stew without burning it? Yes. Can you tell the difference between a reasonable price for flour and someone trying to cheat you? Yes. Then you are already more qualified than I am for the job. I have been living on burned beans and hardtack for 3 months. He offered a slight smile, and Penelope found herself almost smiling back despite everything. Mr. Anderson, if you are truly serious about this offer, then yes, I accept. I need work, and I promise I will earn my keep. Relief flooded his features. I am very serious, miss. He paused, realizing he did not know her name. Langford, Penelope Langford. Miss Langford, I think this arrangement will benefit us both. My wagon is loaded with supplies at the livery. If you have belongings to gather, I can wait. Everything I own is in the boarding house room I can no longer afford to keep. It will take me only a few minutes. The boarding house was a narrow 2-story building that smelled of boiled cabbage and unwashed bodies. Penelope climbed the creaking stairs to the tiny room she had rented with the last of their money after burying her father. Her belongings fit into one battered carpetbag. 2 dresses, both worn thin. Undergarments she had mended so many times the original fabric was barely visible. A daguerreotype type of her parents taken on their wedding day. A hairbrush with a cracked handle, and her father's Bible. It was a pitifully small collection for 21 years of life, but it was hers. The boarding house keeper, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Hutchins, was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. You still owe for 3 nights. I know, and I am sorry, but I have no money. I am leaving now, so you can rent the room to someone else. That does not settle your debt. Then take what is owed out of what I already paid you that I did not use. Penelope kept her voice steady though her heart raced. She hated owing anyone anything. Already spent that money on food you ate. I ate 1 bowl of soup 3 days ago. That hardly accounts for, is there a problem here? Kieran Anderson's voice came from the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his tone polite but firm. Mrs. Hutchins's expression shifted immediately to something more calculating. This girl owes me money. How much? $3. Penelope knew the room cost 50 cents a night. Before she could protest, Kieran pulled coins from his pocket and handed them to the woman. That should settle it. Now wait just a moment, Penelope started. Consider it an advance on your wages, Kieran said quietly. We can discuss the details later. Right now, I would like to get back to the ranch before full dark. Mrs. Hutchins pocketed the money with a satisfied smirk and disappeared into her private rooms without another word. Penelope followed Kieran outside, her cheeks burning with a mixture of gratitude and humiliation. "You did not need to do that," she said as they walked toward the livery. "I know I did not need to. I wanted to. That woman was trying to cheat you, and I will not abide cheating." He glanced at her. "If it makes you feel better, I will deduct 50 cents a month from your wages until the debt is repaid. But I want you to know that it is not necessary. Consider it part of helping you get back on your feet." The wagon was indeed loaded with supplies. Sacks of flour and beans, crates of canned goods, tools, rope, and various other necessities. Kieran helped Penelope up onto the bench seat with a courtesy that seemed natural rather than forced, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The two horses, a matched pair of sturdy bays, started forward at his command, and Marysvale began to fall behind them. The road north followed a creek lined with cottonwoods, their spring leaves bright green against the red rock landscape. Mountains rose in the distance, still capped with snow despite the warming weather. It was beautiful country, harsh but honest in a way that appealed to Penelope after months of broken promises and false hopes. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after they had ridden in silence for a while. "It is called the Anderson Ranch. Nothing fancy," Kieran said. "I run about 500 head of cattle, mostly selling beef to the mining camps and towns in the area. The house is not large, just 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and an office. It was built by my grandfather in 1852 when he first came out here. He was one of the early settlers in the area, back when the Mormons were first establishing communities in the territory. My father expanded the cattle operation, and I have been trying to grow it further. The 5 hands I employ are good men. There is Jack, who has been with the family since my father's time, old enough to be my grandfather and tough as leather. Then there are the Thompson brothers, Sam and Will, who are about my age, and 2 younger fellows, Pete and Charlie, who are still learning the trade but work hard." "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" 24. "Been running the ranch on my own since I was 18. That must have been difficult, taking on so much responsibility so young. It was either that or lose everything my family had built. Failure was not an option I could accept." He glanced at her. "What brought you to Utah Territory?" Penelope had known the question would come eventually. "My father believed in dreams more than reality. After my mother died, he became convinced that California gold would solve all our problems. Never mind that we had a perfectly good life in Missouri, a small farm that provided enough. He sold everything and bought a wagon and supplies, and we joined a wagon train heading west last spring. By the time we reached Utah Territory, his money was nearly gone and he had contracted a fever. He kept saying we just needed to push on to California, that everything would be fine once we reached California. But he got worse and worse, and finally I convinced him to stop in Marysvale to recover. He died 2 days after we arrived. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. He was not a bad man, just a foolish one. He let dreams cloud his judgment." She paused, then added, "I suppose I should hate him for that, for taking away our security and leaving me alone in a strange place. But he was my father, and he truly believed he was doing what was best for us." "Love and wisdom do not always travel together," Kieran said quietly. "But it sounds like he loved you very much." He did. That much was never in doubt. They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the red rocks in shades of orange and gold. Penelope found the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. There was something steady about Kieran Anderson, something that made her feel safe for the first time in months. She had been so focused on survival that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply relax and breathe. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It sat in a valley with the creek running through it, providing water for the cattle that dotted the grassland. The house was built of stone and timber, solid and practical, with a wide porch across the front. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals, and a smaller building she assumed was the bunkhouse. Smoke rose from the chimney of the bunkhouse, suggesting the ranch hands were preparing their evening meal. "It is beautiful," Penelope said honestly. "It is home." Pride and affection colored Kieran's voice. "My grandfather chose this spot because of the water and grass. Even in dry years, this creek keeps flowing. That reliability has saved us more than once." He drove the wagon up to the house and helped Penelope down. Before they could unload, an older man emerged from the barn, lean and weathered, with a white beard and sharp eyes that assessed Penelope in a single glance. "This must be Jack," Kieran said. "Jack, this is Miss Penelope Langford. She has agreed to take on the position of housekeeper." "Miss Langford, Jack has worked for my family for 30 years and knows more about running this ranch than I do." "Miss Langford," Jack nodded respectfully. "Welcome to the Anderson Ranch. About time someone took that house in hand. It has been looking sorrier than a wet cat since Mrs. Brennan left." "I will do my best," Penelope said. "That is all anyone can ask. I will get the boys to help unload the wagon after supper if that suits you, boss." "That would be fine, thank you, Jack." The old man headed back toward the bunkhouse, and Kieran led Penelope up onto the porch and through the front door. The interior of the house was indeed in need of attention. Dust covered every surface, dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen, and the floors looked like they had not been swept in weeks. But underneath the neglect, Penelope could see good bones, solid furniture, and signs that someone had once cared for this space. "I apologize for the state of things," Kieran said, looking embarrassed. "I have been focused on keeping the ranch running and let the house go." "It is nothing that some hard work cannot fix," Penelope assured him. "Show me where I will be staying and then I will start making us some supper." He led her upstairs to a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair by the window. The window looked out over the creek and the mountains beyond, and evening light filled the space with a warm glow. "This is lovely," she said. "Thank you. The necessary is out back, and there is a pump in the kitchen for water. Fresh linens are in the chest at the foot of the bed. If you need anything else, just let me know." He paused in the doorway. "Miss Langford, I want you to know that you are safe here. I give you my word that no one will bother you or make you feel uncomfortable. If anyone does, you come straight to me." "I believe you, Mr. Anderson." After he left, Penelope sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply feel. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude, and a cautious hope all swirled together inside her chest. This morning she had been alone and desperate, trading away her last connection to her mother just to eat. Now she had a job, a place to sleep, and the promise of safety. It seemed almost too good to be true, and part of her waited for the other shoe to drop, for this kindness to come with strings attached, but she could not live her life in fear of what might go wrong. Her father had taught her that, albeit unintentionally. He had been so afraid of their small life in Missouri being too little that he had gambled everything on a dream and lost. Penelope would not make the same mistake. She would be grateful for what she had been given and work hard to earn her place here. After washing her face and changing into her other dress, which was slightly less worn, she went downstairs to the kitchen. The pantry was well stocked thanks to the supplies they had just brought from town, and she found potatoes, onions, salt pork, and dried beans. It was too late to make anything elaborate, but she could manage a decent meal. She got the stove going, thankful that it was similar to the one she had used back in Missouri, and set about peeling potatoes and slicing onions. Kieran appeared about 20 minutes later, having unhitched the horses and seen to their care. He had washed up and changed his shirt, and his hair was damp from water. "That smells wonderful already." "It is nothing fancy, just fried potatoes and salt pork with onions, but it should fill us up. After 3 months of my cooking, anything that does not taste like charcoal is fancy." He hesitated, then said, "Would you like help with anything? You could set the table if you do not mind." They worked in companionable silence, and Penelope found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythms of cooking. This she knew how to do. This was solid and real, not dependent on luck or the whims of fate. She could feel Kieran watching her occasionally, but it did not feel predatory or uncomfortable. He seemed genuinely pleased to have help, nothing more. When the food was ready, they sat down at the kitchen table. Kieran said a brief grace, thanking God for the food and for bringing help to the ranch. Then they ate, and Penelope tried not to be embarrassed by how hungry she was or how quickly she cleaned her plate. "Have more," Kieran said, pushing the pan toward her. "There is plenty and you need it." She did, and the food settled warm and satisfying in her stomach. After they finished, she insisted on cleaning up while he went to check on something in the barn. By the time he returned with Jack and the other ranch hands to unload the supplies, the kitchen was clean and she had hot coffee waiting. The men were exactly as Kieran had described them. Jack was clearly the elder statesman, respected by all. The Thompson brothers, Sam and Will, were identical twins in their mid-20s with sandy hair and ready smiles. Pete and Charlie were younger, probably 19 or 20, both clearly nervous about meeting a woman. They removed their hats and mumbled greetings, barely meeting her eyes. "Miss Langford will be managing the household," Kieran told them. "You treat her with the same respect you would treat your own sisters or mothers, understood?" "Yes, boss," they chorused. The supplies were unloaded quickly with so many hands helping, and the men returned to the bunkhouse for their own supper. Penelope made another pot of coffee and brought cups out to the porch where Kieran sat watching the last light fade from the sky. "Thank you," she said, handing him a cup. "For all of this, for taking a chance on a stranger. You are welcome, but I think I am the one who should be thanking you. That was the best meal I have had in months." He sipped his coffee, then added, "I meant what I said earlier. You are safe here. I know you have no reason to trust me yet, but I hope in time you will see that I am a man of my word." "I think I already do see that," Penelope said quietly. "I am usually a good judge of character and you seem like an honest man. I try to be. My father always said that a man's word is the only thing that truly belongs to him. Everything else can be taken away, but your integrity is your own choice. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He had his moments." Kieran smiled slightly. "He could also be stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery when he did not get his way. But he loved this land and this life, and he taught me to do the same." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee as stars began to appear overhead. Penelope felt the tension that had been her constant companion for months beginning to loosen its grip. She was still grieving her father, still processing everything she had lost, but for the first time since leaving Missouri, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might work out. Over the next few weeks, Penelope threw herself into her work with a determination that impressed even Jack, who was not easily impressed. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, washing windows and floors, beating rugs and airing out bedding. She organized the pantry and the office, creating systems that made sense and saved time. She cooked 3 solid meals a day, and if the ranch hands started finding excuses to come up to the house around mealtimes in hopes of getting some of her cooking instead of their own attempts, well, Kieran did not seem to mind as long as the work got done. But more than just cleaning and cooking, Penelope found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned the names of all the horses and which ones were temperamental. She discovered that Charlie had a beautiful singing voice that he was too shy to share, except when he thought no one was listening. She learned that the Thompson brothers had a standing bet about who could rope a calf faster, with the loser having to do the winner's mending for a week. She found out that Pete was terrified of spiders but would face down an angry bull without flinching, and she got to know Kieran Anderson, not just as her employer but as a person. She learned that he woke before dawn every morning and always checked on the horses first thing. That he had a habit of running his hand through his hair when he was frustrated with paperwork. That he was scrupulously fair with everyone, never asking his men to do anything he would not do himself. That he had a quiet sense of humor that came out in dry observations that made her laugh unexpectedly. She also noticed things she tried not to think about too much. How his hands were strong but gentle when helping a calf in distress. How his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. How he always made sure she had eaten before sitting down to his own meal. How he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her thoughts and opinions mattered. One evening about a month after her arrival, Penelope was in the kitchen making bread for the next day when Kieran came in from the barn. She was kneading dough, her sleeves rolled up and flour dusting her arms, and she did not hear him at first. "You look happy," he said, making her jump slightly. "You startled me." She brushed hair back from her face with the back of her hand, likely leaving a flour streak. "But yes, I suppose I am happy, or at least content. It feels good to be useful, to have a purpose. You have been more than useful. This place has not run so smoothly since before my mother died." He poured himself coffee from the pot she always kept warm on the stove. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Her heart sank slightly. Was he unhappy with her work? Had she done something wrong? "I think we should go to town this Saturday," he continued. "You have been working non-stop since you arrived and you need some time to yourself. We can get you some fabric to make new dresses if you would like, and anything else you might need. Consider it part of your wages." "Mr. Anderson, you have already been more than generous, Kieran. Please just call me Kieran. And I have not been generous, I have been paying you what you are worth, which is considerable." He set his coffee cup down and looked at her seriously. "Penelope, I know you still have the bread you bought that first day. I have seen it in your room, even though it has gone hard as stone by now. You have not thrown it away." She felt her cheeks heat. "I know it seems foolish. It does not seem foolish at all. You traded the last thing that mattered to you for that bread, and you cannot bear to throw it away even though it serves no purpose now. But Penelope, you do not need to hold on to it anymore. You are not that desperate woman on the street in Marysvale. You have a home now and security, and you do not have to keep punishing yourself for surviving." Tears stung her eyes unexpectedly. He understood, truly understood in a way she had not expected. "It was my mother's ring, the only thing I had left of her. I know. And I am sorrier than I can say that you had to trade it, but you did what you had to do to survive, and there is no shame in that." He paused, then said gently, "Come to town with me on Saturday. Let me help you start building a new life instead of holding on to the remnants of the old one." "All right," she whispered. "Thank you, Kieran." His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that Mr. Anderson had not been. But he smiled, and something in his eyes made her heart beat a little faster. Saturday dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect late spring day that made everything seem possible. Penelope wore her better dress and braided her hair carefully, then felt foolish for caring so much about her appearance. This was not a social call, just a practical trip to town. But when she came downstairs and saw Kieran waiting by the wagon, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt, she wondered if maybe he had taken some extra care with his appearance too. The ride to Marysvale felt different than it had that first evening. Then she had been exhausted and wary, unsure of what she was getting into. Now she felt light, almost happy, watching the landscape roll by and listening to Kieran point out landmarks and tell stories about the area. That rock formation there, we call it the cathedral. When I was a boy, I used to climb up there and sit for hours, imagining I could see all the way to California. Did you ever want to go? To California, I mean. When I was younger, maybe, I thought about seeing San Francisco, the ocean, all those places that seemed so exotic. But the older I got, the more I realized I did not need exotic. I needed home, and this is it. These mountains, this valley, this ranch. It is in my blood now, and I cannot imagine being anywhere else. I think that is wonderful, Penelope said, to know so clearly where you belong. I have never felt that way about any place. Missouri was just where we lived, and my father's dream of California was never mine. But being at the ranch, working there, watching the land change with the seasons, I think I am starting to understand what you mean about a place being in your blood. Kieran looked at her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and complicated. I am glad you feel that way. I was hoping you would want to stay, not just for a few months but permanently. I have nowhere else to go and no reason to leave, she said honestly. If you will have me, I would very much like to make the ranch my permanent home. Then consider it done. This is your home for as long as you want it. Marysvale was busier than it had been during her last visit, with wagons and riders crowding the main street. Kieran helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm, which she took, trying to ignore how natural it felt to walk beside him this way. They went first to the general store, where Kieran asked the proprietor to bring out bolts of fabric for Penelope to examine. Pick whatever you like, he told her. You need at least 3 new dresses, maybe 4, and whatever else you might need. She wanted to protest the expense, but something in his expression told her that he wanted to do this, that it mattered to him to be able to provide for her this way. So she looked through the fabrics and chose a sturdy blue cotton, a practical brown calico, a soft green muslin, and after some hesitation, a pretty rose-colored fabric printed with tiny flowers that was completely impractical but beautiful. Good choices, Kieran said approvingly. You will need thread and buttons too, and whatever notions you need for sewing. While the storekeeper was measuring and cutting the fabric, Penelope wandered the aisles, overwhelmed by the abundance after months of having nothing. She picked out thread and buttons, a new hairbrush to replace her cracked one, and some ribbon, telling herself it was practical for trimming the new dresses even though she knew it was a small vanity. Is there anything else? Kieran asked when she returned to the counter. No, this is already too much. Books, he interrupted. Do you like to read? I love to read, but then pick out some books. The evenings are long and you should have something for yourself. When she hesitated, he added, Please, Penelope, it would make me happy to give you these things. So she chose 2 novels and a book of poetry, feeling like a child at Christmas. Kieran paid for everything without blinking at the total, then carried the packages as they walked back toward the wagon. There is one more stop I would like to make, he said, if you do not mind. He led her down the street to a small shop she had not noticed on her previous visit. A sign above the door read Goldsmith and Jeweler. Penelope's heart began to beat faster, though she told herself not to make assumptions. Inside, the shop was tiny but neat, with a glass case displaying rings, brooches, and watches. An elderly man with spectacles looked up from his workbench and smiled. "Mr. Anderson, good to see you. Is this the special order I have been working on?" "It is, Mr. Klein. Is it ready?" "Just finished it yesterday. Let me get it for you." The jeweler disappeared into the back room and returned with a small wooden box, which he handed to Kieran. Kieran turned to Penelope, and she saw nervousness in his eyes, vulnerability that made him seem younger. "I hope you will not think this is presumptuous. I know I have no right, and you can say no without any worry that it will affect your position at the ranch. But I wanted you to have this." He opened the box, and Penelope's breath caught. Inside was a gold ring, simple but beautifully made, with a small blue stone set into the band. "It is not your mother's ring," Kieran said quickly. "Nothing could replace that. But I hated knowing that you had to trade it, that you were forced to give up something so precious. This is not meant to be a replacement, just a new beginning, I suppose, a reminder that you do not have to hold on to the past to honor it." Penelope felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Kieran, this is too much. I cannot accept, please. Let me do this for you. Let me give back something you lost, even if it is not the same thing. Please, Penelope." She looked at the ring, at his earnest face, and felt something shift in her chest. This was not just kindness or charity. This was something deeper, something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because you matter," he said simply. "Because from the moment I saw you on that bench, trying so hard to be brave even though you were terrified, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because having you at the ranch has made it feel like a home instead of just a place I work. Because when I imagine my future now, I see you in it, and I cannot imagine it any other way. Kieran, I know it is too soon," he continued, the words tumbling out now as if he could not stop them. "I know you have been through so much and need time to heal. I'm not asking you for anything except to accept this gift and to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I am here. I care about you, Penelope, more than I thought possible in such a short time." She took the ring from the box with trembling fingers. The blue stone caught the light, and she realized it was a sapphire, the color of Kieran's eyes. "I do not know what to say. Say you will keep it. Say you will think about what I have said. That is all I am asking." "I will keep it," she said. "And Kieran, I care about you too. I have been trying not to because it seemed foolish to develop feelings for my employer, but I cannot seem to help it. You have given me back everything I lost and more. My dignity, my security, my hope for the future. You have given me a home and a place to belong. How could I not care about you?" The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of joy. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the ring. She nodded, and he took her left hand gently, sliding the ring onto her third finger. It fit perfectly, and she wondered how he had managed that. As if reading her mind, he said, "I told Mr. Klein to make it the same size as a woman's wedding band that I borrowed from Mrs. Klein, then adjusted based on seeing your hand size. I am glad I guessed correctly." "It is perfect," she whispered. They stood there in the jeweler's shop, hands still clasped, and Penelope felt the last of her fear and grief begin to loosen its grip. She had thought she lost everything when her father died and she traded away her mother's ring. But standing here with Kieran, feeling the weight of this new ring on her finger and seeing the hope in his eyes, she realized that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what you truly needed. The ride back to the ranch felt charged with new awareness. They sat closer than necessary on the wagon bench, their shoulders touching with each bump in the road. Kieran pointed out a pair of hawks circling overhead, and when Penelope shaded her eyes to look up, his hand came to rest on her lower back to steady her. then stayed there even after she lowered her gaze. "What kind are they?" she asked, trying to focus on the birds and not on the warmth of his hand through her dress. "Red-tailed hawks. They mate for life, those birds. You can see them hunting together sometimes, working as a team. My mother used to say they were romantic, the way they fly together." "Your mother sounds like she was a lovely person." "She was. She made the ranch feel like a home, made everyone feel welcome. She could stretch a meal to feed 12 when we only had supplies for 6, and no one ever left her table hungry. She loved my father fiercely, and he loved her the same. They had the kind of partnership I always hoped to find someday." He glanced at Penelope, and the meaning in his look was clear. Her heart hammered in her chest. "How long were they married before your father died?" 26 years. She only outlived him by 3 months. "The doctor said it was pneumonia that took her, but I think it was a broken heart as much as anything. She did not want to be here without him." "That is beautiful in a tragic way, to love someone so much that you cannot bear to live without them. My father always said that my mother was his better half, the part that made him whole. I never fully understood what he meant until—" He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "I am talking too much. You must think me a sentimental fool." "I think you are a man who understands what matters," Penelope said softly. "And I do not think that is foolish at all." They fell into silence again, but it was comfortable, weighted with things unsaid but understood. When they arrived back at the ranch, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting everything in golden light. Kieran helped Penelope down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist, and for a moment they stood there, so close she could see the darker ring around the edges of his irises, and count the faint freckles the sun had brought out across his nose. "Penelope," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "Yes, may I court you? Properly, I mean. I know we are living in the same house, which makes things complicated, but I want to do this right. I want to take you on picnics and walks, bring you flowers, all those traditional things. I want you to know that my intentions are honorable and serious." "Yes," she said, the word coming out breathless. "Yes, you may court me." His answering smile was brilliant, and before she could think better of it, Penelope rose on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. His hand came up to touch the spot, and he looked so pleased and surprised that she had to laugh. "Was that too forward?" she asked. "That was perfect." "You are perfect." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles just above the new ring. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The next weeks passed in a golden haze of new love and hard work. Kieran was true to his word about courting her properly. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, their stems clutched in his work-roughened hands. They took walks along the creek in the evenings after the day's work was done, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride one of the gentler horses, standing close to adjust her seat and grip, his hands warm and steady. The ranch hands watched this courtship with approval. Jack told Penelope one day, while she was hanging laundry, that he had not seen Kieran this happy since before his parents died, that she was good for him. The Thompson brothers teased Kieran mercilessly when they thought she could not hear, calling him lovesick and moony-eyed, but their grins were fond. Even shy Charlie started leaving little carved wooden animals on the porch for her, tokens of acceptance into their makeshift family. Penelope bloomed under this attention and affection like a flower finally getting enough water. She had not realized how lonely she had been, how much she had been merely surviving rather than living. Now she woke each morning eager to start the day, to see Kieran across the breakfast table, to work alongside him managing the household and ranch. She sewed her new dresses and wore them with pride, appreciating how the colors brought life to her face and how Kieran's eyes would light up when he saw her in them. One evening in late June, they sat together on the porch swing Kieran had hung the week before, ostensibly for her comfort but really, she suspected, as an excuse to sit close to her. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of the roses that grew wild near the house. Crickets sang in the grass, and the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. "Penelope," Kieran said, his arm resting along the back of the swing behind her shoulders, "I need to tell you something." His serious tone made her turn to face him. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is actually remarkably right, which is what I need to talk about." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "We have known each other for 3 months now. I know that by some standards that is not very long. But I have been thinking about what my father said about my mother, about her being his better half. I understand now what he meant because that is how I feel about you. You make everything better, brighter, more worthwhile. Coming in from a long day of work and seeing you in the kitchen, knowing you are here and safe and happy, that is the best feeling in the world. And I realized that I do not want to wait to tell you how I feel. I do not want to play games or pretend to be cautious when my heart already knows what it wants." Penelope's breath caught. "What does your heart want? You. Always you. In every way for the rest of my life." He slid off the swing and onto one knee, still holding her hand. "I know I already gave you a ring, and that probably ruined the surprise of this moment, but I do not care. Penelope Langford, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness, your determination and your laughter. I love how you sing while you cook and how you talk to the horses like they are old friends. I love the way you look at me like I am someone special, someone worth loving back. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes. Yes, Kieran, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first day when you saw me at my lowest and offered me hope instead of judgment. You gave me back everything I had lost and so much more. You gave me a home and a purpose and a future. But most of all, you gave me yourself, and that is the greatest gift I could ever receive." He stood and pulled her up into his arms, holding her close while she cried happy tears into his shoulder. Then he pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears, and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope, and Penelope felt like her heart might burst from joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers and laughed. "I was so nervous you might say no." "How could I possibly say no? You are everything I never knew I needed. When should we get married? I do not want a long engagement if you do not mind. I want you to be my wife as soon as possible. What about the last Saturday in July? That gives us a month to prepare, and it is not so long that we have to wait forever. The last Saturday in July it is." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Penelope felt heat spread through her body in ways she had never experienced before. They might have stayed there all night if Jack had not called from the bunkhouse, asking if everything was all right since they had not seen the boss in a while. Kieran pulled away reluctantly and called back that everything was perfect, that they would have news to share at breakfast. "I should let you get some sleep," he said, though he made no move to release her from his arms. "Even though I would rather stay here with you all night. I should sleep, but I do not think I can. I am too happy." She laughed at herself. "That sounds foolish. It sounds wonderful. And Penelope, thank you for taking a chance on a dusty cowboy who found you at your lowest point. Thank you for seeing past the dirt and the rough edges to the man underneath. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for seeing past my desperation and fear to the woman who just needed a chance. Thank you for giving me back my hope. Thank you for loving me. They stood there under the stars, holding each other and making promises, and Penelope felt like she had finally found her way home. The next morning at breakfast, Kieran announced their engagement to the ranch hands. Jack stood up and shook Kieran's hand with genuine warmth, then turned to Penelope and said gruffly, "About time that boy made an honest woman of you. Welcome to the family, officially." The Thompson brothers whooped and hollered, already planning what pranks they could play at the wedding. Pete and Charlie blushed and stammered congratulations, and Charlie shyly presented Penelope with a carved wooden horse he had been working on for weeks. The following month passed in a flurry of preparation. Penelope sewed a new dress for the wedding in cream-colored muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs, working on it late into the night by lamplight. Kieran rode to Marysvale and arranged for the circuit preacher to come on the appointed day, and invited the neighbors and townspeople who had been kind to his family over the years. Jack oversaw the cleaning and organizing of the barn for the reception, insisting that they needed proper space for dancing and celebrating. 3 days before the wedding, a stagecoach arrived at the ranch, much to everyone's surprise. Out stepped a woman in her 50s with graying hair and a warm smile, carrying a large carpet bag. "Aunt Margaret," Kieran rushed forward to embrace her. "I did not expect you to make the trip and miss my favorite nephew's wedding. Not a chance." She pulled back and looked at him critically. "You look good, Kieran. Happy. I have not seen you look this way since before your parents passed." "I am happy. Wait until you meet Penelope, you will understand why." He turned and called toward the house. "Penelope, come meet my aunt." Penelope came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, and felt a moment of nervousness. This was Kieran's family, his mother's sister, and she wanted to make a good impression. But Margaret took one look at her and smiled. "Oh, you are lovely." Kieran wrote that you were special, but his words did not do you justice. She came forward and took Penelope's hands in hers. "I am Margaret Green, Kieran's aunt. His mother was my younger sister, and I loved her dearly. I can see why Kieran has chosen you. You have kind eyes, and that matters more than anything." "It is an honor to meet you, Mrs. Green," Penelope said. "Kieran has told me so much about his family. I am glad you could be here for the wedding. I would not have missed it for the world. Now, I assume you have 100 things to do before Saturday, so put me to work. I did not come all this way to sit idle." With Margaret's help, the final preparations came together beautifully. She had brought with her a lace veil that had belonged to Kieran's mother, which she insisted Penelope wear. "Sarah would have wanted you to have this. She always said that something borrowed brings good luck, and something from family makes you part of the circle." The night before the wedding, Penelope lay in her small bedroom unable to sleep. Tomorrow her life would change completely. She would become Kieran's wife, bound to him legally and spiritually. It was what she wanted with all her heart, but the enormity of it still took her breath away. Just 4 months ago she had been alone and desperate, trading her mother's ring for bread. Now she was about to marry a good man who loved her, who had given her not just security but genuine happiness. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Penelope, are you awake?" Margaret's voice came through the wood. "Yes, come in." Margaret entered carrying a lamp and settled herself on the edge of the bed. "I thought you might be having trouble sleeping. I remember the night before my wedding I did not sleep a wink." "I am not nervous exactly," Penelope said. "I am certain about Kieran, about wanting to marry him. I just cannot quite believe that this is real, that something so good could happen to me after everything. Kieran told me about how you met, about what you had been through. My dear girl, you have been tested in ways no one so young should be. But you survived, and more than that, you kept your spirit and your kindness intact. That is remarkable. Kieran is lucky to have found you." I think I am the lucky one. He saved me when I had nothing." "He did not save you," Margaret said firmly. "He helped you, yes, but you saved yourself. You were the one who kept going after your father died. You were the one who made the hard choice to trade that ring to survive. You were the one who accepted a job from a stranger and worked hard to build a new life. Kieran gave you an opportunity, but you are the one who seized it and made something of it. Never forget that your strength comes from within you, not from anyone else." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I have felt so powerless for so long that I forget sometimes that I have my own strength. You do, and it is considerable. Now, I came here for another reason too." Margaret reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet bag. "This belonged to my sister, to Kieran's mother. It is a pearl necklace that her mother gave her on her wedding day, and Sarah gave it to me before she died, telling me to give it to Kieran's wife when the time came. She said she knew her boy would find someone special, someone worthy of the family pearls." Margaret opened the bag and pulled out a strand of luminous pearls. "These are yours now, Penelope. Welcome to the family, truly." Penelope accepted the necklace with trembling hands. "I will treasure it always. Thank you, Margaret, for accepting me, for trusting me with something so precious. You are precious, dear girl. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a wonderful day." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, not a cloud in the sky. Penelope dressed with Margaret's help, the cream muslin dress fitting perfectly after all her careful sewing. The pearls gleamed at her throat, and the lace veil made her feel like a fairy tale princess. Margaret had even picked wildflowers and woven them into a crown for Penelope's hair. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Absolutely beautiful." They walked together to the barn, which had been transformed with garlands of greenery and flowers, benches arranged in neat rows, and an arch at the front where the preacher waited. The guests were already assembled, neighbors and townspeople dressed in their finest. The ranch hands sat in the front row, all of them cleaned up and wearing their best, Jack looking nearly unrecognizable without his usual coating of dust. And there at the front, standing beside the preacher, was Kieran. He wore a new suit, dark and formal, and his hair was neatly combed. But it was his expression when he turned and saw her that made Penelope's heart soar. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, like he could not believe his luck that she was about to become his wife. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Penelope was aware of the preacher's words, of Kieran's hands holding hers, of speaking her vows in a voice that only shook slightly. She heard Kieran promise to love and honor her all the days of his life, heard her own voice promising the same. And then the preacher was pronouncing them man and wife, and Kieran was kissing her with the kind of joy and passion that made the guests cheer and whistle. "Mrs. Anderson," Kieran whispered against her lips. "My wife. My Penelope." "My husband," she whispered back, trying out the word and finding she loved how it sounded. The reception was a joyous affair with food and music and dancing. Someone had brought a fiddle, and another guest had an accordion, and soon there was music filling the barn. Kieran led Penelope in the first dance, holding her close and guiding her through the steps, his eyes never leaving her face. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew was possible. You? I feel like the luckiest man alive." He spun her out and pulled her back in, making her laugh. "I love you, Penelope Anderson." "I love you too, Kieran, so very much." They danced for hours with each other and with the guests. The Thompson brothers took turns dancing with Penelope, each trying to outdo the other with fancy footwork that nearly sent them all tumbling. Jack danced with Margaret, the two of them moving with the ease of people who remembered how courting was done. Even shy Charlie gathered his courage and asked Penelope for a dance, blushing furiously the entire time. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Kieran pulled Penelope outside for a moment of quiet. They stood together in the twilight, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking," he said, "about that first day when I saw you outside the baker's. Do you remember?" "How could I forget? It was one of the worst and best days of my life. I almost did not approach you. I thought you might tell me to mind my own business, that my help was not wanted. But something made me speak up anyway. Something told me that you were important, that letting you walk away would be the biggest mistake of my life. I am glad you listened to that something. I am glad you took a chance on a desperate stranger. You were never just a stranger to me. From that first moment, I felt like I knew you somehow, like I had been waiting my whole life to find you." He pulled back to look at her face. "I gave you back that ring, tried to replace what you had lost. But Penelope, you gave me back so much more. You gave me a reason to come home at the end of the day. You gave me laughter and companionship and love. You made this ranch feel like a home again instead of just a place I worked myself to exhaustion. You gave me a future I can actually look forward to instead of just dreading. You gave me back everything and more than I ever dared to hope for." Penelope felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, tears of joy and love and gratitude. "We saved each other," she said. "You with your kindness and opportunity, me with my love and partnership. We were both alone, both struggling, and we found each other exactly when we needed to. That is not luck, Kieran. That is fate. Then I am grateful for fate." He kissed her again, slow and deep, and Penelope felt desire curl warm in her belly. Tonight they would truly become husband and wife in every sense, and she found she was not nervous about it at all. This was right, all of it, every moment leading to this one. They returned to the party, but as the evening grew late, the guests began to make their departures, offering congratulations and blessings. Margaret hugged them both and told them she would stay at the boarding house in town for a few days to give them privacy, much to Penelope's embarrassment and Kieran's gratitude. Finally, the last guest departed, and the ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse, leaving Kieran and Penelope alone in the house that was now truly theirs together. Kieran led her upstairs to the master bedroom, which she had cleaned and prepared but never slept in, it being his private space. Now it was theirs, the bed freshly made with new linens, candles lit on the dresser and bedside table, casting everything in a warm glow. "Are you nervous?" Kieran asked gently, brushing a strand of hair back from her face. "A little," Penelope admitted, "but mostly I am just happy." "I trust you, Kieran. I will be gentle," he promised. "We have all the time in the world. There is no rush." He helped her out of her wedding dress with careful, reverent hands, and she helped him with his suit coat and shirt, both of them trembling slightly with anticipation and nerves. When they finally came together in the marriage bed, it was with tenderness and love, Kieran true to his word about being gentle, Penelope responding with a passion that surprised them both. They learned each other's bodies slowly, with patience and care, and when they finally joined together completely, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like coming home after a long journey. Afterwards they lay tangled together, Kieran's head on her chest, her fingers running through his hair. "That was," Penelope started. "Perfect," Kieran finished. "You are perfect. We are perfect together. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Like maybe this is all a dream and I will wake up back on that bench in Marysvale, alone and hopeless." "Not a dream," Kieran assured her, raising his head to look at her. "Real, so very real. And you will never be alone again, Penelope, I promise you that. Whatever comes, we face it together." The months following their wedding were some of the happiest of Penelope's life. She settled fully into her role as Kieran's wife and partner, working alongside him to manage the ranch. She learned about cattle breeding and grazing rotation, about finances and investments. Kieran valued her opinions and made no major decisions without consulting her, treating her as a true equal partner in everything. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Penelope's careful management of the household budget allowed them to invest more in expanding the herd. Her cooking and hospitality made the ranch house a place where neighboring ranchers and townspeople loved to visit, strengthening business relationships and building community ties. Kieran's hard work and fair dealing earned them an excellent reputation, and soon they were getting requests for their beef from mining camps throughout the territory. As autumn turned to winter and winter to spring again, Penelope began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more easily, and certain smells made her nauseated. She had missed her monthly courses twice now, and her breasts were tender and slightly swollen. She knew what it meant, had seen enough pregnant women to recognize the signs, but she wanted to be certain before telling Kieran. She made a trip to town on the pretense of needing supplies and visited the doctor, a kind older man named Dr. Harrison, who had been practicing in Marysvale for 20 years. He confirmed what she already suspected. She was pregnant, about 3 months along if his estimation was correct, and perfectly healthy. The baby would come sometime in late August or early September. Penelope rode back to the ranch in a daze of joy and terror. She wanted this baby desperately, wanted to give Kieran a child and build a family with him. But she was also afraid. Her own mother had died when Penelope was 16, but she remembered the difficulty and danger of childbirth, had heard stories of women who did not survive it. What if something went wrong? What if she left Kieran alone after promising she never would? She found him in the barn, checking on a mare who was close to foaling. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting up the way it always did when he saw her. "You are back earlier than I expected." "Did you forget something in town?" "No, I got everything I needed, but I did make one stop I had not planned on." Something in her tone made him put down the brush he had been using on the mare and give her his full attention. "Is everything all right? You look pale." "Everything is fine." "Better than fine, actually. I have something to tell you and I am not sure how you will feel about it." Concern creased his brow. "Penelope, you can tell me anything. Whatever it is, we will handle it together." "I am with child, pregnant. The baby should come in late August or early September." She watched his face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction for a moment. Kieran just stared at her, processing the information. Then a smile started, slowly at first, then spreading across his entire face until he was grinning like a fool. "Pregnant? You are certain?" Dr. Harrison confirmed it today. "I am about 3 months along, 3 months." He did the mental calculation. So it would have happened shortly after the wedding. Yes. Suddenly he was across the barn and sweeping her up into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. He set her down carefully, then immediately looked worried. "I should not have done that. What if I hurt you or the baby?" "Kieran, I am pregnant, not made of glass. A little spinning will not hurt me." But he was already fussing, leading her to a hay bale and insisting she sit down. "We need to make plans. The heavy work around the house, you cannot be doing that anymore. And riding is riding safe. We should ask Dr. Harrison. Maybe you should stay closer to town as the time gets closer, in case there are complications." "Kieran, breathe," Penelope said, taking his hands. "I am healthy. The doctor says everything looks good and women have been having babies for thousands of years. Yes, there are risks, but worrying about them constantly will not help anything. Let us just take this one day at a time and be happy about it. We are going to have a baby. We are going to be parents." He knelt in front of her, his hands coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. A baby. Our baby. Penelope, I cannot even express how happy this makes me. I have always wanted children, wanted to fill this house with family the way it was when I was a boy. And now it is actually happening. You are happy then? Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am overjoyed. I am terrified. I am so in love with you I can hardly stand it. He looked up at her with tears in his eyes. Thank you for this gift. Thank you for building a family with me. Penelope cradled his face in her hands and kissed him. Thank you for giving me a family to be part of. For giving me a home and a future and all this love. I never imagined I could be this blessed. The months of Penelope's pregnancy passed in a haze of preparations and excitement. Kieran was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried that she was doing too much or tiring herself out. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love and fear of losing her. Margaret made another trip out to the ranch when she heard the news, arriving with arms full of baby clothes and blankets she had been knitting and sewing. I always hoped I would be a great aunt someday, she said, hugging Penelope carefully. Sarah would be so happy about this. She always said this house needed to hear children's laughter again. The ranch hands were equally excited, each of them contributing in their own way. Jack started building a beautiful wooden cradle in the barn, working on it during his spare moments. The Thompson brothers argued about whether the baby would be a boy or girl and what they should teach the child first. Pete and Charlie shyly asked if they could be called uncles, which made both Kieran and Penelope tear up. As summer heat settled over the valley and Penelope's belly grew round and heavy, they prepared the smallest bedroom as a nursery. Kieran painted the walls a soft yellow, saying it would work for either a boy or girl. They moved in the cradle Jack had made, along with a rocking chair and a dresser for baby clothes. Penelope sewed tiny gowns and blankets, marveling at how small everything was. The baby was active, kicking and rolling constantly, especially at night when Penelope was trying to sleep. Kieran loved to feel the movements, his hand on her belly and wonder on his face. I cannot believe there is a whole person in there, he would say. Our son or daughter, already making their presence known. Very known, Penelope would respond, shifting to try to find a comfortable position. Particularly at 3 in the morning when they decide to practice acrobatics. On a hot afternoon in late August, Penelope was shelling peas on the porch when the first contraction hit. It was not terribly painful, just a tightening across her belly that took her breath away for a moment. She waited, timing it the way Dr. Harrison had instructed. 15 minutes later another came, then 12 minutes after that. Kieran, she called, trying to keep her voice calm. I think it is time. He appeared from the barn so quickly he must have sprinted, his face pale. Time, the baby. Now. Yes, now. The pains are still far apart, but Dr. Harrison said to come to town when they started. We should leave soon. Kieran went into efficient mode, his fear channeling into action. He hitched the wagon in record time while Penelope gathered the bag she had prepared weeks ago. Margaret, who had come to stay a week prior in anticipation of the birth, helped her into a loose dress and braided her hair back. You are going to do wonderfully, Margaret said. You are strong, and Dr. Harrison is an excellent doctor, and I will be right there with you the entire time. The ride to Marysvale seemed to take both forever and no time at all. The contractions were getting closer together and more intense, and by the time they reached Dr. Harrison's office, Penelope was gripping Kieran's hand hard enough to leave marks. Doctor. Harrison took one look at her and immediately ushered them into his back room, which he kept set up for births. How far apart are the pains? About 8 minutes. Penelope gasped as another one hit. Good, we have time, but not much. First babies usually take longer, but I have learned not to make assumptions." He looked at Kieran. "You are welcome to stay if you want, but many men prefer to wait in the other room." "I am staying," Kieran said firmly, taking Penelope's hand. "I will not leave her." "Then wash your hands thoroughly and stay out of the way unless I need you." The next hours were the longest and most difficult of Penelope's life. The contractions grew closer and more painful until they seemed almost constant, each one making her feel like she was being torn apart. Margaret wiped her face with cool cloths and murmured encouragement. Kieran held her hand and told her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. Dr. Harrison monitored everything with calm competence, checking her progress regularly. "Almost there," he said finally. "On the next contraction, I want you to push. Push as hard as you can." Penelope did, drawing on reserves of strength she did not know she possessed. Once, twice, 3 times she pushed, and then suddenly there was a release of pressure and the sharp cry of a newborn baby filled the room. "A boy," Dr. Harrison announced, holding up the squalling infant. "You have a son." Penelope collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated. A son. They had a son. Dr. Harrison quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Penelope's arms. She looked down at the tiny red face, the dark hair plastered to his skull, the miniature fingers that waved in the air, and felt love crash over her like a wave. "He is perfect," she whispered. Kieran was crying openly, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." "Penelope, you did it. You are incredible." "We did it," she corrected. "We made this beautiful boy together." They stayed in town for 3 days while Penelope recovered enough to travel. Kieran barely left her side, holding their son with a mixture of terror and wonder, clearly afraid he might break the tiny baby. But his hands were gentle and sure, and the baby seemed content in his father's arms. They decided to name him Thomas, after Kieran's father, with the middle name James after Penelope's father. Thomas James Anderson. It was a strong name, a good name, connecting the baby to both sides of his family. The ride back to the ranch was slow and careful, Penelope holding Thomas while Kieran drove with painstaking caution. When they arrived, the ranch hands were waiting on the porch, all of them eager to meet the newest member of their family. "A boy," Jack said, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Well, ain't that something? Congratulations to you both." The Thompson brothers jostled each other for a better look, and Pete and Charlie hung back, shy but smiling. One by one, they each got a chance to hold the baby, each of them suddenly awkward and careful with the tiny bundle. "He has got his daddy's eyes," Will Thompson observed. "But his mama's chin," Sam added. "That is a good-looking boy you have got there, boss." That first night home, Penelope sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, nursing Thomas while Kieran sat on the floor beside them, watching with adoration. "I keep thinking about that day in Marysvale," Penelope said softly. "When I traded my mother's ring for bread, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I could never have imagined that just a few months later I would have all this. A husband who loves me, a home, security, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "It was not luck," Kieran said. "It was you being strong enough to survive when everything seemed hopeless. It was you being brave enough to accept help when you needed it. It was you choosing to build a new life instead of giving up. You earned this happiness, Penelope. Every bit of it. We earned it together. You were the one who saw past my desperation and offered me a chance. You were the one who gave me back so much more than a ring or a job. You gave me love and partnership and a reason to believe in good things again." Thomas finished nursing and Penelope carefully placed him in the cradle, where he immediately fell asleep, one tiny fist curled near his face. She and Kieran stood looking down at him, arms around each other. "I gave you back one ring," Kieran said. "You gave me back a whole life, a home that feels complete, a heart that is full, and now a son to carry on the legacy my parents built. You gave me back everything, Penelope, and so much more than I ever dared to dream of." "Then we are even," she said, turning to kiss him, "because you did the same for me." The years that followed were full of joy and hard work in equal measure. Thomas grew from a tiny baby into a sturdy, curious toddler who loved following his father around the ranch, sitting in the saddle in front of Kieran, and learning about cattle and horses before he could even properly talk. When he was 2 years old, Penelope became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Sarah Margaret after both of their mothers. Sarah was the opposite of Thomas in temperament, quiet where he was boisterous, contemplative where he was impulsive. She had Penelope's dark hair and Kieran's blue-gray eyes, and she wrapped everyone on the ranch around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Even tough old Jack turned soft when Sarah toddled over to show him a flower or asked him to read her a story. The Anderson ranch continued to prosper and grow. They expanded the herd to over 1,000 head and bought additional grazing land. They built a new, larger barn and renovated the house, adding on 2 more bedrooms for their growing family. Penelope's careful management and Kieran's hard work paid off in steady profits that they reinvested in the ranch and saved for their children's future. When Thomas was 5 and Sarah was 3, Penelope found herself pregnant for a 3rd time. This pregnancy was harder than the first 2, and she tired more easily. But on a cool spring morning, she delivered twin boys they named William and James. The ranch house, once quiet, was now constantly full of noise and laughter and the chaos of 4 young children. Jack, now in his 70s but still tough as leather, appointed himself the children's honorary grandfather, teaching them to ride and rope, and everything else they needed to know about ranch life. The Thompson brothers taught them songs and jokes, though Penelope had to draw the line at some of the more colorful ones. Pete and Charlie, now experienced ranch hands in their own right, showed the children how to track animals and read weather signs. Margaret visited several times a year, her arms always full of gifts and her heart full of love for her great-nieces and great-nephews. She would sit on the porch and watch the children play, tears in her eyes, and tell Penelope that Sarah would be so happy to see how the family had grown. As the children got older, Penelope made sure they understood where they had come from and how lucky they were. She told them about their grandfather Langford, who had dreamed too big but loved fiercely. She told them about their grandmother Sarah Anderson, who had made the ranch a home. And she told them the story of how she and their father had met, how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best things. "You traded your ring for bread?" Thomas asked, wide-eyed when he was old enough to understand. "Your most precious thing?" "I did. Because sometimes we have to give up what we love to survive, and there is no shame in that. But your father gave me back so much more than a ring. He gave me back my hope and my future. He gave me all of you." "That is so romantic," Sarah sighed, already at 8 years old a dreamer who loved stories of true love. "It is romantic," Penelope agreed, "but it was also real and hard and scary. That is what real love is, children. It is not just the easy moments and grand gestures. It is choosing each other every day, working together through difficulties, building a life one decision at a time." On their 15th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Penelope with a trip to Salt Lake City, leaving the children in Margaret and Jack's capable care. They stayed in a fancy hotel and ate in restaurants, and went to the theater like proper city folk. It was wonderful, But Penelope found she missed the ranch and the children after just 3 days. "I never thought I would be the type of person who could not wait to get back to rural life," she laughed as they rode the train back to Marysvale. "I always thought I would love the excitement of a city if I ever got the chance to experience it. But now you know better." Kieran asked, his hand covering hers. "Now I know that home is not about where you are but who you are with. The ranch is home because you are there, because our children are there, because that is where we have built our life together." Wise words from the woman who traded her last possession for bread and ended up with everything. "Everything and more," Penelope agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So much more than I ever imagined possible." When Thomas turned 18, he told his parents he wanted to stay on the ranch and eventually take over running it. Kieran and Penelope could not have been more pleased, seeing the legacy they had built being passed on to the next generation. Sarah, at 16, announced she wanted to be a teacher and help educate the children in the growing community around Marysvale. The twins, at 13, were still figuring out their paths, but they had time. Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by the family he had adopted as his own. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch he had loved, and every person who came to pay their respects had a story about his kindness and wisdom. Penelope wept at the funeral, remembering how he had welcomed her that first day and made her feel like she belonged. "He was a good man," Kieran said, his arm around her. "One of the best I have ever known." "He was family," Penelope said, "in all the ways that matter." More years passed, marked by joys and sorrows, achievements and challenges. The Thompson brothers both married women from town and built houses on the ranch property, raising their own families while continuing to work the land they loved. Pete became the ranch foreman when Kieran and Thomas decided to share the management duties. Charlie married Margaret's granddaughter, who came west for a visit and never left, enchanted by both the young cowboy and the beautiful country. When Penelope was 45 and Kieran was 48, they became grandparents for the first time when Thomas and his wife Emily welcomed a daughter. Holding the tiny baby in her arms, Penelope thought back to that desperate day in Marysvale when she was 21 and alone, when she had traded her mother's ring just to survive. She thought about how impossible it would have seemed then that she would someday stand in a beautiful home surrounded by family, holding her grandchild, secure and loved and happy beyond measure. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, coming to stand beside her and look down at their granddaughter. "About how far we have come. About how that scared, desperate girl in Marysvale became this woman with everything she could ever want. About how you gave me back not just what I had lost, but a whole life I could never have imagined." "We gave each other everything," Kieran said. "That is what love does when it is real and true. It multiplies what you have instead of dividing it. It makes you more than you were alone." "Then we did it right," Penelope said, leaning into him. "Because I am so much more than I was that day. So much happier, so much fuller, so much more complete." On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas and Emily with their 3 children, Sarah with her husband David and their 2, the twins William and James both courting young women who would likely soon be wives, Margaret now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, the Thompson brothers and their families, Pete and Charlie and their wives and children. The house and yard were full of people Penelope and Kieran loved, all of them connected by blood or choice to this place and this family. Kieran stood on the porch and called for everyone's attention. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She came into my life when I needed her most, though I did not realize it at the time. I thought I was helping her, offering her a job and a place to stay. But the truth is, she saved me just as much as I helped her. She made this house a home. She gave me children and grandchildren. She turned a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy. She gave me every happy moment of the last 25 years, and I hope she will give me 25 more, and 25 after that if we are blessed to live so long. He turned to Penelope, taking her hand. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, which I would not have thought possible then. You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. Thank you for saying yes to that scared cowboy who approached you in Marysvale. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Penelope was crying, but she was smiling too. Thank you for seeing me when I was at my lowest and offering me hope instead of judgment. Thank you for giving me back everything I had lost and so much more. Thank you for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me, for giving me a family and a home and a reason to believe in happy endings. I love you, Kieran Anderson, with everything I am and everything I have. They kissed while their family cheered, and Penelope felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt on their wedding day. After all these years, after all they had been through and built together, the love was still there, still strong, still growing. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet, Penelope and Kieran sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars come out. It was the same swing they had sat on when Kieran proposed, now weathered by 25 years of use but still solid. "Do you ever think about that day?" Kieran asked. "When I saw you outside the baker's with that bread, sometimes. Usually when I am feeling particularly grateful for everything we have. I think about how close I came to giving up completely and how your kindness pulled me back from that edge." "I was terrified approaching you," he admitted. "I thought you would tell me to mind my own business, but I could not walk away. Something told me I needed to talk to you, that you were important somehow." "Fate," Penelope said, "or divine providence, or maybe just dumb luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." "Me too." He pulled her closer and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and home. "Penelope Anderson, you traded your last possession for bread, and in return you got everything. A home, a family, security, love, everything and more." "So did you," she pointed out. "You gave me a job and a place to stay, and in return you got a wife, children, grandchildren, a partner to share your life with. You got everything and more too. Then I would say we made a fair trade. The best trade imaginable." They sat there in the comfortable silence of long partnership, watching their world settle into night. The ranch spread out around them, solid and thriving, a testament to their hard work and love. In the house behind them, their children and grandchildren slept safely. The future stretched ahead, full of unknown joys and challenges, but they would face it together as they always had. Penelope looked down at her hand, where the sapphire ring Kieran had given her still sparkled on her finger, now joined by a simple gold wedding band. She had never once regretted trading her mother's ring for that bread in Marysvale. That ring had represented her past, a life that was over. This ring represented her present and future, a life that was still being written. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Kieran replied. "Always and forever." And under the vast Utah sky, surrounded by the land and family they had built together, they sat in perfect contentment, knowing that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what you truly needed. Sometimes you had to trade your last possession to discover that what you gained in return was worth more than you could ever have imagined. Sometimes a desperate moment on a dusty street led to a lifetime of love and happiness. Sometimes a cowboy and a woman with nothing but hope found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. something that would last for generations, a legacy of love and perseverance, and the kind of partnership that makes everything possible. They had started with nothing and ended with everything, and that was the greatest gift of all.